I'm actually living in the community here. I'm your MC for the evening. I would like to thank everybody on behalf of Mind Freedom for your attendance here this evening, and I would like to thank our speakers. I would like to say of our speakers that they've made a very special effort to be here, and they've all given freely of their time. No fees have been paid to anybody. They're all doing it from the goodness of their heart. Which is just as well, because we in Mind Freedom don't have any funds. We're a shoestring operation. We're flying on a wing and a prayer. This event was made possible by a fundraising event organised by Mary Maddock here. The event was held here in the hotel. It was a swim-a-thon. And we'd like to thank the staff of the hotel who have been enormously helpful and supportive, and especially Pam, who made an awful lot of effort. You know, the members of the Leisure Centre have been very helpful and supportive of us also, and that helped us raise sufficient funds to stage tonight's event. I'm going to avoid naming names of members who were helpful, because I mean, I'd certainly leave people out, and that's better avoided, because I've been a recipient of ECT, and that has a major effect on my memory. So naturally I won't remember anything here right now, but I might also forget to write the stuff down, which goes with the territory. Our supporting hotel was such that we didn't really consider any other location, but other than to have it here. So the group, our group is Mind Freedom. And just a couple of words about it. Mind Freedom Ireland was born out of Mind Freedom International. We began to meet roughly six years ago to share information and to plan ways of opposing psychiatric churning, which had been imposed on us and others. The treatments we have received have been very detrimental to us, and many of our friends who can't be with us now it has resulted in many deaths. We seek to increase awareness of the damage caused by psych drugs, principally neuroleptics, benzodiazepines and SSRIs. We'd also like to draw attention to the fact that ECT is still widely practiced, and psychosurgery is still enshrined in our laws. In fact, the new Mental Health Act came into being in 2006, which still permits psychosurgery. So for those who don't know, a nice pick playing with your brain. We in Mind Freedom have held demonstrations. Demonstrations really were events to increase public awareness. We've held meetings in shopping centres and at various locations in Cork City. We've also had a demonstration outside the Dáil. You know, just to mention of an upcoming event, we've been fortunate this next weekend in that we have gotten a stall or a booth at City Hall. This came about because of somebody else's misfortune, somebody who had booked it and paid for it, who weren't able to avail of it, and it fell to us. Essentially, our group, all of us in the group, have been through the psychiatric treatment grinder, and we're totally committed to helping others avoid falling prey to the pharma medical drive to gouge out ever-increasing profits at the expense of the citizens. Like this pseudoscience, it's a fake science, and it's been forced on people, and I think that needs to stop. We are particularly anxious that as many children as possible be steered clear of psychiatry. I'll just talk briefly about myself. I mean, my encounter with the psychiatric system. My initial encounter occurred when I was 18. I had become addicted to benzodiazepines, when I was being given surreptitiously, and I had become dependent. And I was taken to Our Ladies, to St. Anne's, where I was admitted for the benefit of the people who were giving me the drugs, as turned out. I was put into a coma for about 5 months. This was probably an insulin coma. And I was maintained, that coma was maintained while the drugs were withdrawn. Now, at the end of that, I went in January and I woke in June. So obviously they were going to have a problem with the questions I would be asking. So they overcame this by taking me down to the electroshock room, and I was electroshocked very severely. I came out of there after being in there for about 5 or 6 months, and I thought and continue to think for 25, 30 years that I'd only been in there for a fortnight. I could go on and on about my various experiences, which were fairly gruesome in the system, but nonetheless I had the good fortune to meet Mary, you know, back at the beginning of Mind Freedom, and Mary had liberated herself from the system shortly before that. So we were able to encourage each other and encourage others. There's many shocking, horrific stories with respect to psychiatry, and I think it's vitally important that people educate themselves and try to steer their children clear of getting caught up in the system. I think without further ado I should go to our first speaker. Sorry. I imagine the nerves are going to go away, instead they've gotten worse. Now, our first speaker of the evening is somebody many people will know well, a very courageous lady. I've had the privilege of canvassing on her behalf when she ran for the European election last time round. She ran into an awful lot of organised opposition, I feel. And much of it was because she honestly outlined in her manifesto what she stood for. She called the flu vaccine, which was then on the go, she called it a scam, which is absolutely what it turned out to be. She's a person of enormous integrity and a very, very brave lady. And what she stands for is truth, nutrition, and she's big on family. And she's got a very large family herself. She's got a family of 9, which is odd because I'm from a family of 10 also. So I'll hand you over to Cathy Simmons.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's absolutely brilliant to see so many people here today, because I think there's going to be a very, very important message tonight here. I'm waiting to hear it myself, and for a little while I have to run out because I'm actually multitasking tonight. But there's such an important message here that, you know, sometimes it happens in you know, I suppose Cork or anywhere in the world, that some of the really important messages, it's just a few people hear it, but there's enough of us here to be yeast or to be leaven to all of Cork. So go out tonight, from tonight, and tell people about what you hear. Now, I'm also very privileged to be with the people here, and I have a little bit of a connection with some of them. Martin is just someone I'm a big fan of Martin's and the work he's done and where he's come from. Mary has taught my son, 34 years old, to swim and to like water. Now he's a young man who can't speak, but having accomplished that, she's decided to teach him piano. Of course, Mary's the only one in the world that believed he could do it, and guess what? Mary's got him doing it. So, you know, that's a lesson right there in what the people here, the message they have to give and what we have to take We have to believe these things can happen. There's a human being behind all those drugs, etc., and we have to bring them out. Then there's someone that I've admired from afar, and I'm going to get his name wrong, but it's sorry, okay, he can tell you what his name is. But anyways, just who has fought for years for us, and you know, in Ireland, so much of the work that's being done here has, you know, been freely plagiarized with his blessing, you know, and transplanted over here. And then Terry Lynch. I remember reading his book a very long time ago, and in fact, I think I bought 3 copies because I lend it out, and of course, when you lend out books, they never come back. And, but really a lone voice for so long, or should I say for so long, still a lone voice. And then Bob Whitaker, I'm a new fan of his because I only finished his book about 2 weeks ago. And really I want to come back to Bob. So I want to tell you a little story, and you're going to hear a lot of stories tonight, so I'll just be as brief as I can because in fact you're far more interesting people to listen to than me. But just this week, a grandmother rang me. Yeah, I have a helpline, it's called the Hope Project. And a grandmother rang me, and I won't give any indication of her name or where she's from. In fact, we'll say she's from Alaska, so nobody can identify her. Except that probably in Alaska they wouldn't have had this system, so we will admit she's in Ireland. Her daughter had an episode around the time of the birth of her first and only child. Of course, we all know about these episodes, you know, and how so often you can get trapped into the whole psychiatric thing at your most vulnerable at the time of birth, when your hormones are, at the best of time, all making us act a little bit, you know, not quite the calm, collected, normal that we normally are. You know, labor does that to us, but her daughter got trapped in that and has been in psychiatric care, in and out of psychiatric hospital ever since. And that's 16 years because the son that she was ringing me about is 16 now. Very bright kid. In fact, listening, I suspect a gifted kid, a child that never has to study and gets straight A's. But has now been diagnosed with, you know, I mean, it's nearly like a litany. You know, I love the litanies, you know, like the litany to Our Lady, da, da, da. Well, he's nearly got a litany, right? Attention deficit disorder, oppositional defiance, you know, OCD, this list that, you know, I think every time he goes to the doctor he gets, you know, another added on. And the problem is, you know, sticks and stones may break our bones, but words will never hurt us. It's not the titles that are hurting him, it's the 14 prescription medications he takes every day. A 16-year-old boy. Now, to reach 14 medications a day, he obviously must have been put on them. You know, 1, then 2, then 3. How many years did it take to reach 14 prescriptions? This guy's 16. But he also faces a school system that, you know, she was explaining to me how you gotta take him easily. He's the loveliest kid, but you gotta take him easily. And at the meeting she had been having the week before with the school and the social worker, etc. And he's out in the playground and he comes running and he knocks on the door and the headmaster goes out and got to go to the toilet. Of course, when you're on 15 prescriptions, you know, you gotta go to the toilet. And the teacher just said, oh, go way out of that, you're just looking for attention. He wet himself and he hasn't been back to school since. This kind of no human being at the end of, you know, end of our eyesight, or no human being, you know, in our reports. So she wants to know what to do. And of course, where do you start? Number 1, you have to unravel 14 medications. You at a school and a support system. And I asked just by, sorry, how to wind up with, is that working? With 14 medications, and she said, you see, because of his situation, I've had a social worker watching over my shoulder since I brought him home in a blanket.